Always a delight to come here with the very latest in the world of business. I am Pius Kojobaka. To that big story we are following up for you, government is expected to tap into the $51 billion fund set by China for African countries. Well, this is what Joy Business has picked up from persons close to the presidential team that participated in the China-Africa Summit just last week. Joy Yafe has more.
Joy Business understands that an immediate proposal couldn't be made in China because Ghana is still studying the conditions for the necessary drawdowns from the fund. Sources say a lot more work still needs to be done in Ghana in the coming days before that formal request could be made. Joy Business is learning that government is also looking at using the funds secured to finance ongoing infrastructure projects in the country. There is another component of the fund that can be accessed by private sector in Ghana, which government would also play a lead role to assist these private businesses. The $51 billion announced by the Chinese government during the Africa Cooperation Summit is going to operate like a fund that any African country can apply if you meet the conditions, and it could be used for infrastructure projects, job creation, and investment in some critical areas in Africa. In a separate development, Joy Business is learning that government also used the meeting to fast-track discussions on restructuring debts owed China.
Meanwhile, government of Ghana is expected to start servicing its Eurobond debts as soon as next month. Well, this will be dependent on the outcome of the ongoing Eurobond debt exchange program, which started last week and will end on September 30th. Now, a careful look at the prospectus shows that some $212 million payments could be made by the World Bank on behalf of Ghana, as those bonds issued in 2015 were guaranteed by the Washington-based lender. Let's have a discussion on this. Joining us via Zoom is economist Professor Lord Mensah. Thanks so much, Professor Mensah, for joining us on Business Live. First off, I want you to tell us, what do you make of arguments that looking at Ghana's current debt levels, we should put a freeze on any fresh borrowings or fresh credit, especially with regards to this $51 billion fund set up by China for African countries?
Yeah, so good evening to our viewers out there. I would say that we have to be careful and get to know the type of debt that we are going into. The fact that our debt has gotten to a threshold that we're struggling to service it does not mean that, we cannot, continue to borrow. But then we have to be careful the package. Debts can be packaged in different forms. If it's a package that is going into a project-specific, debt, then I would say that, yes, indeed, it's a good thing because we may have to look at a project that can be self-financing, that can pay for itself, and possibly inject any money that will come into. And I've been suggesting that we should look at how we can ring-fence, our existing debt, which, we are struggling to pay. And then going forward, every single penny that we borrow into the country must go into projects that can be self-financing. But then I like the bit of private sector financing because you're looking at possibility of private individuals having access to funding, and which Ghana is struggling as we speak now, looking at our high interest rate levels and all those. So if we get an external funds that will come into the country to come and serve that purpose through the banks, right? Because the reason why I'm emphasizing on the banks is that the banks have the technical know-how to determine which sectors of the economy are doing well and all those. So effectively, I'm happy that such a fund is being made available by the Chinese government, and somehow, African countries can tap into it. But then we should be careful, and get to know the package. If it's a type of fund that we're going to borrow to come into the pool of government, which is not directed towards any, project, then I'm afraid I would say that we shouldn't go in that direction.
All right, we shouldn't go in that direction, you say. But on the flip side, do you think that there can be a justification for debt refinancing when it comes to these fresh borrowings, you would say?
Yeah, we can use those monies for debt refinancing. It's not something that we may have to look at. And the lenders themselves will know, that, at the point that we find ourselves in now, any attempt to leave the government all by itself, they will borrow to refinance. And that is not I don't think that is what creditors may look out for. Creditors may look out for project-specific, lending, which at the end of the day, they expect that the project will pay for itself. Nothing short of that.
All right, Professor Mensah, let's move away from this China issue and focus on our external debt restructuring, because we know that Ghana, for instance, has made some significant progress on negotiations with Eurobond holders.
Yeah, it is a good signal. I mean, I would say that as a result of this, debt negotiations ongoing, it has put up some, uncertainty on the Ghanaian economy. And the government itself wasn't specific in both the 2024 budget, I'm talking about the main budget, and the review, the kind of exchange rate they're going to use for foreign transactions as a result of this ongoing discussion. Because they know very well that when we resume our debt payment, it's going to have a serious impact on our foreign buffers, thereby, pushing into, the exchange rates against the local currency. So from where I sit, I think, it will reduce the uncertainty if we speed up the negotiations and government get to know the quantums of, dollars that we have to be using to service our debt, every now and then.
And ultimately, we understand that the External Bondholder Committee, has agreed to the terms that it will fully participate in the offer, and that should be a good one for us, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it should be. It should be. But then, the uncertainty has been hanging for some time now. Even to the extent that investors are getting fed up. Where they don't even know the true levels of our exchange rate. So from where I sit, I think we have to speed it up and, stop, if I should say, we should stop holding up, this discussion and be fidgeting with it and coming out with information that sometimes are not necessary. But for me, we have to be concrete, because these are things that, the investor community, the stakeholders of the economy looks out for every now and then to think about, the future and plan as far as the Ghanaian economy is concerned.
And when you look at the progress being made by government on this external debt restructuring, what could be the impact on the economy generally?
Oh, well, it will reduce the uncertainty that is hanging on the economy. And if we are able to come out with concrete conditions and debt service levels, it should be able to tame down the exchange rate. Initially, we're going to see reactions, on the market. But over time, the rate will find its own true level. And from there on, investors and businesses can plan when it comes to projections in dealing with foreign transactions.
Professor Mensah, thanks so much for your time here on Business Life. We appreciate your thoughts there. And one longer on the economy, because government has rejected reports that it is set to embark on a debt restructuring for local contractors. Well, this was contained in a statement issued by the Finance Ministry. We've got more for you.
The statement by the ministry is coming at a time that there have been reports that the government is set to embark on a debt exchange program targeted at the commercial banks and local contractors. But the Finance Ministry in a statement maintained that these reports are not accurate. The ministry in a statement argued that there has not been such plans on the table. It added that the domestic contractors' liabilities, on the other hand, are payment of claims and cannot be classified as loans or bonds for it to fall under the category of obligations eligible for restructuring. The Ministry of Finance again assured the public in a statement that it has never invited contractors for debt restructuring discussions. It went ahead to explain that the completed domestic debt exchange program only covered domestic bonds held by the central bank, pension funds, and retail debt investors, with no mention of contractors' payments.
Now, some commercial banks have started reintroducing charges on foreign exchange accounts. There is more in this report.
Some of these banks in a text message and email have communicated to their client that they will start charging maintenance fee on their foreign exchange account starting August 2024. Now, this charge will be dependent on the account type in terms of currency and the amount, as you could be charged as much as $20 every month. So, for instance, dollar account holders will pay $5 every month if you have more than $100 in your account. This is in addition to the 3% charge as withdrawal fee, again depending on the type of account you have. Joy Business understands that the action by these few banks have been influenced by the Bank of Ghana's recent increase in cash reserve ratio for commercial banks, which is now requiring the banks to provide cover for their foreign exchange account in cedis. For some of these banks, this has become a huge cost for them and need to find some ways to share the cost with the depositors.
So we shall have a conversation on that. But commercial banks say they are moving to restructure aspects of their procurement systems to ensure that rising cost of operations, which is as a result of the cedi depreciation, is reduced significantly. Speaking to journalists, Managing Director for GCB Bank, Kofi Adomako, said the situation is very challenging, hence a new strategy to minimize costs.
Expenses has been a problem. You know, we've been investing heavily in technology. A lot of the technology we are investing in is dollar denominated, so we have to import, pay for licenses, pay for software, etc. It's a real challenge, okay? It's a real challenge in dealing with that, but we are negotiating very hard with our vendors. We are trying to structure vendor financing such that the way we pay, we lock in exchange rates. We are changing the contracts that we have so that things don't get out of control. And then the overall due diligence we do, okay, on our contracts these days have changed. We are looking at structuring our contracts in such a way that the burden and the risk of FX risk is really mitigated. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. We are looking at outsourcing the things we need to outsource. Those that we are not very strong at doing, we are outsourcing them. We've also increased our level 1 and level 2 support for our IT infrastructure. So now we have some things that we can do internally, we are doing, and we are paying in cedis instead of getting people to come and do those things and pay in foreign currency.
Joining us now is banking consultant Dr. Richmond Tuahene. Thanks so much, Dr. Tuahene, and good to see you. Now, help me understand how expensive it has become for banks to operate.
Very expensive, and it's not the first time. Since 2012, cost to income ratio has been consistently hovering around 53%, and last year it was 54%. Seriously, it's been like the MD said, you go and sign a contract with Terminus or Flexkey. They service you and charge you in dollars. But if you look at the foreign banks, it's a bank like Stanchart, it has its hub in Dubai, supplying all their banking operations all over the world at a minimal cost. But if you look at these Ghanaian banks, their cost to income ratio has really gone up because, as he said, we tied in with foreign companies like Flexkey and Terminus, and they charge you dollars. Even Renewal are charging dollars, and because of that, the cost is going up. And he said outsourcing. You know, outsourcing is another way of reducing your costs. But invariably, it depends upon the type of services you want to outsource in banking. Some of them are very, very sensitive. And if you do not take care, you outsource certain things to go and hit your balance sheet. You outsource the janitorial services. I mean, the cleaning and the washing of the place. But it depends upon the type of pricing and contract you go in. And again, if you look at our cash reserve ratio, you know, when everybody is talking, they leave it that way. The more you lock up money in the higher reserve cash reserves, the more your costs go up. And currently, cash reserve ratio, some are 20%. And if you have to lock a minimum of, say, 20% for every 100 cedis, that is a cost to you because the amount locked up is what we call unremunerated funds because the money has been locked up. And all these things go in pricing of the cost. So if your cost to your income ratio is not able to accommodate, then it means you are in a serious problem.
And I want to understand how effective that restructuring aspects of procurement system would be.
Well, in other countries or in other good countries where you talk about co-sharing, we call it co-sharing. I mean, if you're doing satellite, instead of relying on FTN, you share the cost among the institutions, so that goes down. If you look at your cash services, cash delivery, if you can combine with other institutions, the cash location will go down. All these things are methodology that helps you to bring the cost down. And again, one thing that is also that if your non-performing is very high, it dovetails into your cost. And unfortunately, most of the state banks, categorically, if I have the data I have, all the state-owned banks have a higher non-performing asset. And because of that, it also moves your cost-income ratio very high, in addition to the Bank of Ghana higher reserves. And all these things affect your profitability. It affects your profitability because you spend, for every 100 cedis you get, you're spending close to 54 cedis. Even though it's cheaper than in Nigeria and it's cheaper than in Ivory Coast. But in South Africa, it is about 40%.
All right. So, as we wrap up the conversation, how much of this challenge is linked with exchange rate volatility? Because we are hearing that banks are introducing charges on foreign exchange accounts, for instance. And what could be the implications if banks do not get around these high costs?
Pius, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, I think in June, I did a paper about higher cash reserve. And I specifically put my argument on those who have higher foreign deposits. Because at the beginning of the year, if the dollar was 11.2, and you provided 10% of the 11.2 at that time, or 10% of that time, and today, the same dollar, you're being forced to provide 10% of, say, 160. It means that you're locking yourself out in something you cannot do anything with. So the banks have realized that if they are to provide more at central bank, why don't we pass on some of the cost to the banks, to your customers? If your customer decide to do it, you move it $20. And I'm told some of the banks are even charging $30, those who are foreign currency. All that they want you to do, that they want you to reduce the amount of your foreign cash or foreign holdings with them so that they do not have to provide so much to the central bank as higher cash reserve. So it's a strategy. It's a strategy for the banks that because the dollar is running, they need to take position. And the position is that we want to be short in dollar and be long in cedi.
All right.
If you have so much cedi deposit, you don't have much problems with it.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Dr. Richmond Etiahini. Always delight to have you on, speak to us on banking-related stories. We appreciate it. Away from the banking sector, in the last few days, Brent crude prices have fallen sharply. How will this impact oil marketing companies? And of course, what are the implications for exploration and refining firms? And I've been joined via Zoom by Dr. Yusuf Suleiman, energy strategist, who is also the chief executive of Eureka Solutions. Thanks so much, Dr. Suleiman, for joining me on Business Live. Quickly, tell us about why prices declined and for how long this morning prices seem to be bouncing back.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you, Pius, and to your cherished listeners and viewers in Ghana and across the globe. Yeah, indeed, we seem to be having some bearish sentiment reigning into the market, and that is, of course, good for the downstream, as you rightly pointed out. Things seems to be looking good. I mean, almost every variable seems to be looking good for the consumer. We just hope the consumer will take advantage. they will reap the maximum benefit from this. What are the factors, like you rightly asked? Yeah, there are a couple of ones. Most of them are external. Number one, the number one and the number two consumers globally. We're talking about US and China as we speak now. The economic data emanating from their quarters doesn't look that robust in a way, especially with that of China. You remember, China is the number one petroleum product importer. You know, US is number one consumer, but they also produce, unlike China. So they, in a way, net out. But because of this economic data from this quarter that is not looking that robust, it's impacting oil demand. And then the second component has been the fact that OPEC Plus played a game, and when it backfired seriously, what they did, they announced that they're going to unwind the supply cuts back to the market, and the market read into it. Though they quickly came back and said they're going to take back the supply cuts. I mean, they'll unwind that in somewhere next year, but it didn't work to do that magic. So yes, we do have oil prices dropping in the international scene, and we are hoping that it's supposed to be cascaded to the to the pumps in the downstream, especially for petroleum product consumers like we have in Ghana.
All right. So what could be the implications for OMCs and of course refining exploration firms, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's a good one, though margins, of course, depend on your efficiency in refining business. You may have some, if you are very efficient, you reap a lot. So directly to the downstream, it bodes good for the downstream. When oil prices or petroleum products are not so, are in a little bit low, petroleum consumers are supposed to benefit. And in Ghana, I think we're going to have some benefits in this case, especially we are talking about the coming in of Star Oil that has increased a lot of competition within the market. And I consider that as specifically very encouraging in a way that you will not see pricing with the three major OMCs as we speak. Now you can clearly see that Goil, Total, and Shell, they are now charging different prices. And that's very good. And it's nothing but because of the coming in of almost a potential second force, which is coming in a good stage, which is Star Oil. And so, yes, the aggregate of and also the fact that we are not anticipating any hidden tax increment at this moment in time or margin adjustment, upward adjustment at this moment in time. I just hope that even with this drop within the international scene, definitely is going to cascade down to the pump. And I can say that if it holds, we're going to have some further drops at the pumps coming the next window.
All right, let's talk about the measure between the VRA, the proposed measure between the VRA and, of course, Bui Power Authority. I've heard you caution government to tread cautiously, but how should government go around this thing?
Yeah, so yes, indeed, mergers and acquisitions are something that is not a bad idea. I mean, we do that to increase efficiency. Every company will do that, restructuring to increase efficiency. But in this specific situation, my worry about that and why I said the government should tread cautiously. These companies individually, in fact, they're one of the SOEs that are doing very, very well in terms of their profitability, in terms of their efficiency. So you actually merge companies that are not doing that good. Yes, you may seem to do what we call continuous improvement. But in doing that, we don't have to induce, or we may have to tread cautious so that we don't induce kind of inefficiencies in their individual operations. And another most important thing that is emerging is the fact that we are told that the thermal plants may have to be taken out or decoupled from VRA asset, and that is a cause to be worried about Pius. And if you do that, they are the cash cow for VRA. If you take the thermal plants out of it as a result of this measure, then it's going to have a serious impact on the cash flows of VRA. And we know the contribution of VRA to our energy security. So that's why I said government has a tread cautiously in this case.
All right.
And so that a broad-based, a consultation has to be done before this kind of activity is made to go through.
Dr. Yusuf Suleiman, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it, sir. That's it for Business Live for today. I am Pius Kojo Baka. We have more stories for you when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Do visit the portal and get yourselves updated. See you at 8 p.m. with Prime Business.